hello, and welcome to episode 89 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin, that's Kevin.
Today we're talking about the second intermission of Trails to Azure, which they can't call it intermission because they already used that name for the intermission. This is called Fragments. So I've played Fragments, you've played Fragments, I've played the finale. I don't understand why this has the name it does.
I agree. I also don't know why it's called Fragments, but here's something else that I don't understand, Kevin, is that you had beaten the chapter before I even got started. And I'm like, okay, I want to try to get an episode out. Hey, Kevin, do you think that there's enough to talk about with just fragments? And Kevin, in 2 words, says, absolutely not. And then I played it and I listed out all the shit that happens. And we definitely have enough to do an episode. Like, what were you thinking?
Well, first off, I am I'm speechless, Colin. I am honest to God at the loss for words at this lie. I said we had enough for at least one episode, maybe two, for just fragments
No, you
alone. So
didn't.
deceiving
What the fuck are you talking about?
this deception on our listeners is not something I can countenance.
Do you want me to provide receipts?
No.
um, so ladies and gentlemen, before we get started, just a bit
In
of
all honesty, I thought a lot of the reveals happened in the finale, so
fair.
my
Um,
bad.
in order for ladies and gentlemen, for like housekeeping purposes, the podcast is now available on YouTube. As a podcast, it is not available video because we don't have those files anymore, and frankly, you don't need to see them. It'd be a pain in the ass to edit too. But YouTube has a feature in which it can link to the RSS feed that we normally update for the podcast itself, and then it goes in and downloads those episodes and converts them into video, just with like the logo as the video. But it allows you to search it on the website. It allows you to share it with your friends if you want. It allows you to use YouTube Music, whatever you want to do. If you prefer to use YouTube for podcasts or what have you, we're on there now, just so you know. Kevin, anything else that you want
But
to mention before we get started?
this is in addition to
Yep.
all the other places you can find us. We are
Oh, yeah.
still wherever you listen.
Plus, I added us to Audacity and a bunch of other destinations that I've never heard of before, of which I think some people have downloaded off of those, but whatever. The reason why I'm expanding is that the month of July has been the most successful month of this podcast ever. Our previous peak was 1,490 downloads, and that was last January. And then we kind of had a bit of a dip because we got very busy. I'm going to keep the upload schedule for a bit. And then we've been slowly recovering since, never quite getting there, but getting higher and getting close. And then as of right now, Kevin, how many episodes do you think has been downloaded this month?
I'm guessing 1800.
Not quite 1,800, but very close. 1,784.
That is such a large amount. And we think a lot of it is due to whatever kind soul posted on a forum talking about this podcast, suggesting it, recommending it, and we can't thank you enough for the kind words.
Yeah, I because we noticed that there was a spike, like a large spike on July 23rd, I think. And so I Googled the podcast to see like where the fuck is this coming from? It might have been July 19th, I'm not sure, but I think it was the
No, it was
23rd.
the 23rd because we
Okay.
had a big spike in the DC area when Joe Biden has a lot more time on his hands now.
Was about to say, what the hell are you talking about? How do you know where it came from? This is a good point. No, but somebody had posted on a forum that we're a bunch of historical nerds with good banter that really did a good deep dive into like the trade conference and stuff like that. So whoever that person was, we see you and we appreciate your feedback. And I would get offended at the word nerd, but we're pretty fucking nerdy, so I'll take it on the chin.
There's a lot. to talk about in this episode. Like I've said all along, we got it's mostly the politics, the reveals, the plot. Gameplay wise, we'll talk about that. It's fairly standard as things go. We get a new party member for the first and only time that we see him, but it's been a while since the end of chapter 4 when we're the SSS getting arrested. We get a time skip of a couple weeks. Stuff has been happening in Crossbell, around Crossbell, and across Zemuria while we've been out of the picture.
Yes. One of the biggest things, so obviously we remember Guerrilla Fortress is vaporized by those archaisms that the society provided and that Kia kind of controlled slash buffed up. I don't. They talked a little bit about what she was doing with those in this chapter, but after that, Chancellor Osborne was assassinated, and the Empire of Erebonia tossed into civil war between the nobles and the reformists. Calvert itself has its own domestic troubles with the rise of anti-immigration terrorism in response to the Crossbell situation. Um, at the same time, Dieter Croy, who Kevin very famously in the last episode called not an imperialist and only concentrating on domestic stuff, has now bullied all of the small states of Zemuria to join him in an economic union. So, Kevin, what are your thoughts about these international developments?
Well, Colin, thanks for the shout out. I am never wrong. Just get that out of the way. And I think we can look at this as the small nations rightfully rising up against the imperial hegemons of the continent of Western Zemuria. So it's a voluntary association. One. Two, I think it reveals something pretty interesting about what the state of Western Zemuria is. So what Crossbell has with the Septarian, with the barrier, with what they did to the invasion, they are clearly a major power with the Septarian of Zero, with the Ion. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it seems to me even the juiced up Crossbell and the smaller nations are a counterweight or a significant force that can do something to and against Halvard and Erebonia with the Civil War, mind you. And I wonder how much of that is just the metaphysical items with the Septarian, and how much is, if they really did band together, they could be something more than the pawns, non entities, or flyover countries that they are now.
I think
They don't
geograph
know their own strength.
I think geographically it's pretty difficult. I mean, Liberal and Crossbell, sure, maybe, but it's not like they border each other necessarily. Arteria, I don't think has much of a military outside of the church stuff that we've seen. Um, Also,
Soft
Kevin,
power.
I mean, yeah, okay, there's soft power, but soft power is nothing against hard power when it comes to time to war. I think the military power of this so-called voluntary union, which I'm going to talk about in a second, what it means to be voluntary,
Or the
that
Mukuba chariots.
that all seems to be based off of this new we're using nuclear in a metaphorical sense, but nuclear weapon that Dieter Croy pulled out of his ass in the form of Kia and the ions. I don't think we've really seen that much of like an extra oomph that the Crossbelt Defense Force got or anything like that. And you have been on this podcast numerous times complaining how inefficient and poorly designed the CGF is. And since nothing changed, it seems weird that you're now saying that Crossbell's military can rival Erebonia just so long as they have Liberal with them at the same time.
Yeah, not the military. Well,
You
all
did
of
no
these
no you
smaller
just you
nations.
just explicitly stated military.
The Septarian of Zero.
You said even without the Septarian of Zero, that all of these banding together could be a nice counterweight to Erebonia and Calvert.
And even without the metaphysical counterweight, I did not mean a purely military counterweight, but more that they could make their voices heard and mattered.
I think it's difficult to argue this because it's very clear from the text printout that it's voluntary in the way that a medieval lord voluntarily gives an oath of allegiance to their king. Like Liberal didn't want to do it, but was pressured into finally acquiescing. And the same thing with Arteria. I see this as Dieter Croy taking advantage of the chaos in the two larger nations to try to establish Crossbell as a new hegemon in the middle of the continent, and starting with some of these smaller states that he could conceivably bully into submission.
I have two things I want to raise. One's a question, one is the exact wording. So the summary that we're using says that it's highly attractive, this economic alliance under pressure from Arabonia and Calvard. What Croy wants is highly appealing diplomatic tactic. And I wonder how genuine that is. One, two, and this is a genuine question.
Hold on,
Roy's
whoa, hold
economic,
on, yo, hold on. I'm looking at this. Where does it say it's very attractive?
highly appealing diplomatic tactic.
Okay, you saying it again doesn't tell me where it is. Is this the first
Search
paragraph?
it.
Okay,
Uh,
appealing. For those small countries and autonomous states constantly under pressure from the Arabonia Empire and Calvert, this proposal is a highly appealing diplomatic tactic. As a result, though the neighboring countries were originally critical of Crossbell's high-handed method, it gradually turns into a situation in which even they've become unable to resist this flow of events. I think they're wrong about it being appealing, and I think that that next sentence kind of proves that. They're originally critical, it's high-handed, and then they're unable to resist the flow of events. That is not appealing, that's giving in to the pressures that surround you.
okay, and then okay, let's cut this bit next. I want to look up what the voiceover, whatever text
If you can find it, I
says.
tried to find it on Trails in the database and I couldn't.
Found it.
Okay, good for you. So did you actually find it?
Let's just skip over.
Did you actually find it?
Yes, but it says something to guess my position.
I think you should share your screen and we can talk about it.
Search autocratic on trails in the database. Azure.
Okay. Trails to Azure, autocratic. Search. Okay. I think this
It's
is perfect.
T3520.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to read the full text of this so that we're all on the same page so that, we know what the wording is. I'm going to quote. Boom. That day.
Wait, I want to mute my work laptop.
Okay, I can't hear it, but fine.
Oh, never mind, then I won't mute it.
That day, under the guise of non-aggression, the newly independent Crossbell state proposed a daring diplomatic coalition. The proposal, the establishment of the United Nations of Zemuria with Crossbell as its leader. In exchange for economic security, military action would be prohibited. Erebonia and Calvert were coerced into cooperating, and soon after, small states followed suit. I guess that they could be pressured because they had their own problems. Liberal, Remiferia, and Arteria opposed the union, declaring it too autocratic. However, with the major powers yielding, they too had to capitulate. In Calvert, an economic crisis stemming from the events in Crossbell had begun. Anti-immigration terrorism was on the rise. Meanwhile, Erebonia had become ablaze in a civil war between its nobles and reformists. Rumors spread that the Blood and Iron Chancellor had been shot and killed. Unofficially, Ouroboros made its endorsement of Crossbell known to every nation on the continent. Soon, nothing would be able to stop President Croiss's ambitions. So, Kevin, with this in mind, would you still say that this is a voluntary association?
It's a complicated issue.
No, it's not. And as a classicist, I'm going to cite something that you should know really helps elucidate this, which is how the Romans conquered the Greek city-states by declaring their freedom.
Yes.
They were free to live autonomously, so long as they never took any independent military action and never opposed the Romans, which in ancient diplomacy talk means that the Romans, who were invited into Greece by the Aetolians, by the way, to defend against Philip II of Macedon, uh, then just conquered them using diplomacy. I've been reading the account in Livy. It's really quite fascinating. And now I'm thinking that Dieter Croix is basically a Crossbellian Titus Quinctius Flaminius, declaring the liberty of Zemuria under Crossbellian leadership.
I want to examine a different comparison. Harvard and Erebonia, they seem a lot like 19th century empires, the old paint the map our color imperialism. Do you think that it's fair to say what Dieter Croix is doing is a neo-colonial type imperialism of economic subjugation where you're not going to send in Crossbell administrators to be the governor, the vice prefect, what say you, but control the country by controlling the economy, an economic sphere of influence?
I think that there's the potential. We would need to see how it plays out in practice. I do think that forbidding there to be military action in a union that he's kind of forcing together because of all of these economic weaknesses, to me is leveraging economic power to achieve diplomatic, almost client state status, which is
Yeah,
different than just relying upon economic ties of dependence. It's related, but I think slightly different.
and unofficially, Ouroboros made its endorsement of Crossbell known. I wonder, do they have regular, unofficial channels with the major powers? If Calvin wants to get something known to Ouroboros, can they do that? I wonder. If you're not like in league with them, but you know how, say, if the US wants to get something known to Hamas or the Taliban, they use known intermediaries in the UAE, United Arab Emirates. Is there something like that for Ouroboros? Because I think everyone would benefit if they could communicate through unofficial channels. Like,
Well, I mean, just going based off of what we have seen already, because there is more information about this in later games, but sometimes I get accused on Twitter of spoiling things for you. So I'm trying not to do that. But it was pretty clear that Osborne knew about the Ouroboros Liberal incident because he tried to invade Liberal with tanks that he would only use if there was no orbital power.
he's like kind of in league with them,
Well,
I
that
thought.
we don't know. All we know is that they were cooperating at that time, and that he's the government of Erebonia. So there's a channel there. We also know that the royal family of Liberal at least knew about Ouroboros' existence because we've talked about it with them during the Liberal crisis and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I gotta be. I know an answer to this, but I'm not going to reveal it because I don't want to be accused of spoiling things.
Because like I wonder if now if the Queen of Liberal,
Alicia.
if she wanted to get a message to Ouroboros, would she be able to? Just a
Uh,
thought experiment.
Well, I mean, I think that with this is enough evidence to prove that they can, because if Ouroboros can quote unquote make things unofficially known, that means that there is a mode of communication, right? They can't do that
Yeah,
unless there's a mode of communication.
and something where the governments know this is legitimately coming, this is legit from the society.
Right. The secret society that nobody knows about and yet does all of these things that everybody knows it's them. They're like the
I
Masons.
wonder though, they do a lot publicly, but not under their own name. They have cat's paws. They have Colonel Richard for the coup. They have whatever was going on with the floating cities in the end of SC. Let's just skip over that.
You mean the one that was led by an Anguis?
But I don't know the people from what we talked to in the NPCs in the second half of SC did not seem like they were aware of the society. And the society here seems to be limited in Azure, a select group of people. Dita Croy is the face.
Yeah, okay. So clearly they are talking to Dieter Croy, but we also see the scene between Sigmund and Shirley in which they know about the Ouroboros people. So now, okay, the Jaegers know about it. It's not like Jaegers are discreet, they're not going to just hide the secret of Ouroboros' existence because they were told to. Like they're an employer, they're talking about them in the open. Um,
Colin, don't call me Shirley. One,
I never called you Shirley. What the fuck are you talking about?
two. Never mind. It's a joke.
It's a bad one. It's as bad as my student who ends every joke with the punchline, "It's a carrot."
Red Constellation is really high up in the leaderboard of Jaeger rankings with their win-loss record for the postseason. So,
Yeah, which means that they're not going to die, so they can tell their stories about these superhumans while they're drinking in bars.
Colin, it's Kaseki. No one dies. No one ever dies. No one gets punished.
Weissman died. We saw it. Kevin did it. You did it.
How many people die not named Weissman and Gunter?
Um, there's a few nameless people who died in the battle before the sack of Crossbell.
And
Oh, and Guy Bannix.
yes, but
Guy Guy
I bet
Bannix
if
died.
Kaseki could resurrect him somehow, one, they would.
Huh.
Two,
It's almost like we're going to talk about
that was
that
a
later.
legitimate choice in the end of the game. So yeah, that almost didn't happen, but that's the finale. That's not
And we'll
Fragments.
talk
You're
about
right.
that later. Look, it is funny because the game has a really good way of raising the stakes, but then once you realize that nobody is dying, um, well, okay, let's be fair though. It just says that here Osborne was assassinated and shot, and you don't know any different.
Luva, I forgot Luva,
Yep, Luva died. That's true.
but this
What
series is
what
not
about what about the hundreds of people that Joshua killed that you so stubbornly held on to as reasons why he's a war criminal, or all the people that Randy killed off screen?
Oh, you're right. Like I said, crimes can be sins can be forgiven, crimes must be punished. I would hold their hands, call them my brother, leading them to the gallows.
I am so glad that you're not Jesus. I don't know why I said that.
Redemption is a big theme.
I felt like that was going to make a good point, and it didn't. I might cut that part, but I don't cut very often. Um,
Redemption is a big theme of this game, and one day we're going to do a sidebar on redemption in this game and other games and media as a whole. And what is redemption? How is it different from, say, grace or mercy? And all sorts of interesting discussions on this umbrella of forgiveness.
Kevin, are you asking me to do a deep dive on the Pelagian debate about grace between Pelagius and Augustine? Because I can do that, but we asked last week how many people understood any time we talked about history or shit like that. And universally, the two answers we got were, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, forgiveness and who's doing the forgiving? Why do we forgive? Is it for the person forgiving or the person being forgiven? And what does redemption improve a story? How do you do a good redemption arc? Are things beyond the pale? But you know what's really beyond the pale?
What, Kevin?
Um,
This
huh?
silence is really long. How are you going to move analyze the factions current at Crossbell to that transition?
Well, you know what's beyond the pale, Colin?
What?
Do you know what's beyond the pale, Colin?
I do know what's beyond the pale. You know what's beyond the pale, Kevin?
The food situation. Crossbow is cut off. How is everyone in Crossbell not starving?
Um, okay, it's crossed off to people that they don't want to be put into the city. I'm
With
absolutely
Tiberia,
sure. Yeah, I'm absolutely sure that the Crossbell Defense Force can import things from America because it's cut off for those that the CGF or the Defense Force doesn't want to be put in. We're cut off
can
because
America
we're
feed the
arrested.
city?
Presumably, it's got a bunch of farms. What else is it there for?
Well, I mean, Crossbell seemed like a major metropolis, major urban
There's like
population. You
200
need
people who live there.
that's in the game. Everything that is shown to us suggests minimum six figures, mid six figures, more likely seven figures.
But by that same logic, then Amorica is not just two screens and a farm. There's more stuff there.
You would need a really large geographic area to feed,
I mean,
minimum 500,000 people.
and they do. And I mean, Crossbell has natural resources for fish. We have pasture lands. We have farms. And sure, there's some importation stuff as well, I would assume, like the acerbic tomatoes.
Who's gonna trade? Who's gonna trade with them?
Well,
Avonia's
Dieter Croy just forced half the continent to do it. We just talked about that.
basically you're bolded by Erabonia in a civil war, and Kelvin, which has a domestic insurrection.
And Liberal has an airship business that has just been strong armed into allying with Crossbell.
Colin, do you want to hear me talk about the logistics of airships and why it's
Well, I'm
stupid
just
again?
saying that maybe right now the airship business is helpful.
And say, for a country like Crossbell and Liberal, dense rail connections, also no parking, and dense construction in general would be by far the most economically efficient way of doing things.
Okay.
Cars.
You're just stating right now that Crossbell cannot trade because it is surrounded by two nations at war, one of which, Erebonia, is very famous for its reliance on rail. And yet, my point is that they can trade because the Burl can fly over everything with its airships. And then you responded
Look at
with
the
doubling down.
Stalingrad airlift.
Who gives a fuck about the Stalingrad airlift? You're acting like Crossbell is
They
this closed off thing, and it's not.
No, but you need hundreds minimum
It's an
every day
abstraction,
to
Kevin.
feed.
It's an abstraction.
You see, liberal airships. Oh, liberal, the fleet of airships. There's 30 of them
And there's
in the
probably
current air fleet.
30 NPCs in Crossbell. So everybody gets an airship.
Then the text says the current fleet has 30 airships.
I don't think that the fleet is what we're talking about though, because look at people like the capitalists that have their own shipping business. That's not counted in the fleet.
Okay, yeah, but they have one ship. How many people per day can one ship if making regular direct, you go in, you drop, you come back, unload?
We don't know, but we do know that Crossbell has a viable airport. So clearly there's enough going on.
I don't think there is.
Well,
They should all be starving.
okay, well, clearly, Kevin, they're not. Also, this is only in a couple of weeks. It's not like this is a prolonged thing, but I still maintain that they are not closed off. The only way that they're closed off is that they've cut down the rail situation with Erebonia by vaporizing Guerrilla Fortress. That is going to cut down some traffic. But everything else, I mean, I think Crossbell has done a pretty good job at maintaining a leadership position, not closing itself off.
Okay, maybe you should cut that
Oh, I'm not cutting this.
sidebar.
We just had a huge discussion. I'm not cutting it. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm not sure I'm right, so
Yet I'm not cutting that part either. All right, Kevin. There's a lot of factions going on in Crossbell right now. I'm only going to go over them a little bit because I think it's interesting that all of these people are playing. We have Ouroboros operating in the background. We have the Red Constellation acting as a mercenary service in the service of Dieter Croy, which is interesting because he is the president of Crossbell. He already has the defense force at his beck and call, but he also has, independently of them, a high-class mercenary band. And I just watched a YouTube video about how Muslim countries in the Middle Ages would hire Christian nobles to be mercenary bands for them for the exact reason that they could utilize them against their own people, which is exactly what Dieter Croy did. So I think that's cool. We also know that Highway.
Have you read the Canterbury Tales?
I mean, I read one of the tales in which somebody kissed a butthole through a window, but that was when I was in high school.
The night of the Canterbury Tales, outside in the frame device of them telling stories, he fought in North Africa as a mercenary, head of a band.
It's pretty cool. I think we pronounce it Knigget though. That
No,
that's
it's
a
night.
that's a Monty Python joke that I may or may not cut. We'll see. We also have Highway that's active. We see that they have not been eradicated by the Red Constellation. We've already seen them be active a bit in some side quests before, but now they're back. They're coming in full force. They're getting Yin back on their side, which is important because we know how powerful she is. At the moment, Ravash is not active on account of being arrested. We also know in the downtown area, the the Vipers are effectively disbanded on account of Vald's a demon and decided to disband them. But the Testaments, even though Wazy and Abbas are gone, are still maintaining some degree of organization and control of the area. We're going to talk about Wazy at the end of the episode because I want to talk to Kevin about that specifically. But those who know where I'm going with that. Is there anything else that you found kind of interesting about the factions at play in Crossbell at this point in time?
Yeah, I get Rosh not being a major contender and obvious reasons why. Highway kind of receding into the background, I thought it just felt like there was something undone. That story was kind of abrupt. I know we get a bit of them in the finale. Yes, Yin slash Russian Mail, but that is not part of Highway. But their kind of disengagement didn't feel like an entirely satisfactory resolution to them. It just felt like it was kind of just stopped abruptly. And I don't know if that's intended, but narratively, I didn't quite gel.
Well, I'm gonna have to see how I feel when I get to the finale, because I don't have those feelings at all. But I also haven't beaten the game yet. Uh, I think that if you had done, like some of the hidden quests have them more active after they quote unquote retreat, from what I remember. So it could be that I just see them as more active than you do because I've been exposed to that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to see. I don't remember it being particularly unsatisfying or anything like that. Um, I do think it's interesting that they've tried to neutralize the SSS by separating everybody out. Like the SSS is seen as a power block in and of themselves, which is interesting for a four-man team. But it's anime. That happens. Uh, Lloyd, since I've mentioned that they've been kind of separated, is brought to the police academy prison, which is, kind of um, narratively interesting because that's where Lloyd got his start, right? That's where he becomes a detective. When we read
Yeah.
this prologue material, like that's where it's all set for him. But now he's in its jail, and he's in its jail with Garcia, the Jaeger who was in charge, not in charge of the mafia, but like the second in command of the mafia. Um, and we have some interesting dialogue there about how he knew Guy Bannings. He's comparing Lloyd to Guy, and then Garcia decides to help Lloyd break out of prison by doing some tomfoolery where it looks like he's beating Lloyd up, and then they beat up the cops, and then they run out, and then Garcia kind of like stays behind under the guise of I need to be there for my guys. But at least to me, it was pretty clear that he was holding the defense force at bay to help Lloyd escape. And I think it's interesting here that we have a cop that has to now rebel against the state and does so by cooperating with the definition of a criminal, right? The mafia. It's in the place where Lloyd got his start and where he's supposed to end, but then he doesn't. What did you think about this scene? Is there anything literarily that came to mind for you?
Yes, in the end of last episode, I said I bet Noel was going to be the one to break him out. She would have a heart, like her heart would tell her, and um, that is not what happened.
Nope. I
So
th
she
found
is.
I found No's position really interesting. Like she's pretty principled.
Uh, that's one way to put it. It is the chain of command. It's the hierarchy. It's I don't want to say she's just following orders because that, but it's not dissimilar to she's just following orders.
She's following orders
She
because
knows.
she believes that upholding the strength of the defense force slash the guardian force is essential to Crossbell's security, and that to her is her highest priority over everything else. So
Well, yeah,
it is just following orders, but it's following orders because she cares about the broader organization, not because, oh, well, I was just told to do that. It's following
yeah, the
orders with a
security.
higher point.
It's the security of Crossbell. The freedom of Crossbell is clearly second place, if not lower, on the totem pole to her. And then we see this. We'll talk about the finale, but the army, the defense force, I don't think comes off looking all that hot in the end of this game with vis-a-vis Dieter. They come out, I think, to me, pretty cowardly. I think Noel is at this point, she's wrapped herself into this ideological blinders she's put on herself, which the security of Crossbell over the well-being of Crossbell's citizens, not the abstract notion of the Crossbell polity. I think she's hiding cowardice essentially behind duty, like a lot do. If you ever seen Game of Thrones, like a big sub theme of that.
Maybe. I will say I don't remember thinking that even when I got through the finale, but I know that there's like a big scene in the finale in which Lloyd like gets to her and she rejoins. So we'll talk about that then. I will say that even if there is cowardice to some extent, I don't see Noel as being cowardly. I think that she has two dueling loyalties. One is to Crossbell and one is to the her friendships and relationships. And she decided, at least initially, to side with the state. Uh, but doing it out of a love for country and a love for family and a love for friends too. Um, I'm sympathetic. I don't know if I would have made the same decision. Of course, I would never be in that position because I am a coward. But I don't know.
Like,
I kind of respect it.
am I saying it's poorly written or doesn't make sense? No. I think this not sure what the word is, this conflict, inner turmoil is realistic, is well written, and it gives us more insight into Noel's character. But I think as a piece of writing and characterization, it's good. As a piece of like Noel as a person, it shows her cowardly side. And that can be good. It's conflict, it is struggle. We don't want perfect characters, which are boring characters.
I guess another way to put it this way, when I hear you call Noel being cowardly, it's to me it sounds like you're judging her. In which we always make judgments, right? That's the whole
On
point
a
of critical.
personal level,
Right, right. I'm saying like, do you not understand her position? Like, can you not have
yeah,
any
I do.
sympathy for the conflict that she's in?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I don't think I'd be any different, any better, maybe even worse. Um, yeah,
The other thing that I thought was interesting about the discussion with Garcia, I mean, I don't, the conversation about Guy bannings and stuff is interesting, I guess. But given our political bent in terms of analysis, I think
I
this is
hated
the
it.
mine. Would you let me finish? I'm just saying, like, I think this is the first time that that anybody calls Dieter Croy a dictator, and that's significant. But you just told me that you hated it. So what did you hate and why?
I hated how again Guy Bannings is presented as almost superhuman, perfect person, and
Garcia goes out of his
Wazy,
way. Hold on. Garcia goes out of his way to point out that he was not perfect.
in a way, to like that makes Guy seem better.
No, he's pointing out that Guy had strengths and weaknesses in the same way that we all do. I thought, like, I honestly thought that you were going to come here and go back to the discussion that we had about Guy Banning's last game, in which he's idealized in Lloyd's head. And I thought that Garcia was a good counterpoint to all the idealizations that Lloyd has while maintaining the core. I mean, Guy Banning's had to be special in some way, right? He had to be effective in some way. Otherwise, he wouldn't have raced through the ranks and do all this important stuff. But Garcia gives us the evidence that shows that he has flaws too, which Lloyd never seems to give a shit about.
The way he says it, oh, Dudley was a better investigator. The that Arios was better at the bigger picture, at combat, whatever. Yeah, Guy is like a second to Giants in the field, and overall, he's good. Like, or maybe it's just I don't like how he respected Guy.
What's unrealistic about that?
I would have it softens him. I would have liked it was like he was trying to put me away. Kind of glad he's dead,
I
but
mean,
I'm gonna help you here because our interests align.
the glad he's dead, sure, I get that, but I don't know, man. I've watched enough Sopranos to, and you have as well, because we've been debating about whether the ending is good or not. It's bad.
It's good.
But there's like these lines get blurred between competition and cooperation when it comes to police and organized crime. It makes all the sense in the
I get
world.
that.
It makes all the
I
sense in
get
the
that.
world
Colin,
for you get that, but then you say shit that ignores this fact completely. It's completely understandable that Garcia would have respect for Guy as a person, even if they had to fight. It's kind of like the Jaeger thing anyway.
I mean, I get it. No one loves a good enemies to lovers trope done more than me. No one.
This is not an enemy to lovers thing, dude.
I'm just saying, no. Just saying in general, two people can't stand each other. They realize that hate, opposite side of love, what's that feeling
Why do
in
you think that
them?
they can't stand each other, that they hate each other? There's no evidence for that.
I'm not saying this
You are
situation, but in
saying this.
general,
You're talking about this.
it changed. Okay, back to Garcia. But like, I would have liked it if it for the grudging respect, it was a bit more grudging, a bit less respect than what we got.
That's your opinion. I thought it was pretty well done. I liked it a lot. Something else that I liked. You know what else I liked a lot, Kevin?
It didn't have
I didn't have what?
the items for most of the level
Oh,
in the
I didn't give a crap about that. They throw you healing items left and right. It does not matter at all. No. What I was going to say is that I really liked Zeit's appearance as a holy beast. Because you hated Zeit from the beginning, but then at the end he's like, fucking Ragnar. You had Ragnar in your house the whole time. And I don't know why, but I think that's dope. What did you think about the Zeit revelation?
you know, as a culture, we're so into dogs. Doggos, dogs going everywhere. It would have been nice. It would have been nice if the cat was a
If you
holy
think if
beast.
Cop, the cat that
Yes.
lives on the roof of the SSS
Yeah.
building, if he was the
Yeah.
holy beast,
Yeah.
which you only find
Yeah.
out if you feed him every chapter.
He's a holy beast, really?
No, he's not. I was making a
Oh,
joke.
no. My hopes just got dashed. So I was actually very surprised. I didn't think that there was anything more to Zeit than just being this slightly above normal intelligence for a dog, which when I look back on that statement, I think should have made me realize, oh, there's clearly something going on here.
Yeah, like we've talked last episode about how there are some things that kind of come out of nowhere, and there are some things where, like, now that you have the context, a lot of things make more sense. And the timing and nature of Zeit's interventions makes a lot more sense when you realize that he's a holy beast.
Yeah. There's he did not put people in danger like Ragnar did, so good for that.
Now,
He gave a
Ragnar
lot
was
of
mind controlled.
exposition.
It wasn't Ragnar's fault that he got mind controlled.
Oh, and who was mind controlling him? Luva.
Yes, but and then Okay, we've already had this discussion. I agree that the act of mind controlling the holy beast was probably not a good thing. I will say that Luva, given that task, did a better job than he could have. Um, but I'm just saying that the only person who's not at any fault at all is Ragnar. Ragnar.
Oh yeah, it's not Ragnar's fault. It's Luva. He sucks. Okay, we get basically the exposition that we need. We get a giant lore dump. Text is thrown at us. Revelations, information. Do you think like was this the best way of going about it? Like how else could we have learned this stuff? Did we need to learn all of it?
I mean, I do think that it's good for like telling us what happened back in the day. I think they might be trying to do too much at once because it's explaining both why holy beasts are there, which we already kind of knew. It's
Yeah,
explaining the nature of the Septarian of Mirage, which we kind of already knew, but also kind of didn't.
yeah.
And the nature, like it's taking all of these concepts that we kind of already knew about to a degree, and then building on them and then forming themselves into a narrative, which like when you put it that way, that's kind of how it should be. Like that's how a lot of when you're doing pedagogy of something, you start off with these things here, thing there, and then you bring it into a whole. I will say that as somebody who's played through this series before, some of these lore dumps kind of get lost in the background and you kind of forget about a lot of the stuff, especially since, the Septarian of Mirage disappeared 1200 years ago. And unlike, the Oriole or however you pronounce it that came back, she hasn't come back. It's all Kia. Um, but something that I did find interesting about the Septarian of Mirage. So, um, Zeit describes the Septarian of Mirage as he uses the word demiurgos. We in English would call this the demiurge. And the demiurge is a facet of Platonic and, more importantly, Gnostic theology. And the word Gnostic should stick up in our minds because this is related to the DG cult, which produced Gnosis. And is we've already talked a little bit about how it's bringing in a lot of this Gnostic imagery and theology in the past, and maybe we need to do a sidebar on that. Um, but the demiurge in its original Platonic form, the demiurge is an intermediate being between the God that creates everything and the world of matter itself. So very, 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 very quick crash course on this. In Plato, the world can be divided into forms or ideas and material matter. And in his view, the mental world, the world of ideas, is the actual world because that's perfection, and the material world is always flawed. So the example that's always used is think of the concept of a chair. A chair has a seat, a back, four legs. And as an idea, that is like the perfect description and idea and concept of a chair. In the real world, there's different variations of the chair. Sometimes chairs have different functionality, or they could be missing a leg, or there could be imperfections there. And that's why the material world is less perfect than the real world. So the creator God thinks of reality. He creates the world of ideas, and it's the demiurge and his intermediaries that is important. Their role is to bring the world of ideas into the material world. This is the deity that is actually doing the creation. This is interesting because that's the whole point of the Septarian of Mirage. That the Septarian of Mirage takes these concepts that humans have and makes them reality. Right? They're creating a new reality out of the ideas that people have and bringing them into the material world. But then the Gnostics take that idea and posit that the demiurge is an evil god, and then the creator god, the god of ideas, is the good and holy and nice god. Some Gnostics go so far as to say that the God of the Old Testament is the demiurge, and the God of the New Testament is the real God. So these are two different gods that are at loggerheads and are competing. And the demiurge is the bad god, and the normal god is the good god. And this also is then mirrored by how, as the Septarian of Mirage is taking on human empathy, she becomes a vessel for humanity's fight against Aidios, which is why ultimately she has to will herself out of existence because she can't take it anymore. But in that moment, we see a transition between the Platonic idea of the Demiourgos to the Gnostic idea of Demiourgos, how that's corrupted and is then seen as a fight between God, Aidios, and the Demiurge. And I didn't think about this when I first played it, but I am kind of a little bit shocked at how these small things show that Falcom really kind of knew some Gnostic texts and is playing around with a lot of these ideas.
I'm not sure if I respond to all of that. I do
Yes,
want to bring up
I
something
do like
about
how I
plasticity.
criticized them for a lore dump, and then I just gave a lore dump.
Just gave a Lord dump.
Anyway, you were
The
saying, I'm sorry.
aureole was static. Well, not, but did not change from the beginning until we entered it in the end of SC.
Right, it was
The
not sentient.
Septarian,
It made no decisions. The humans had to shut it down.
yeah, the Septarian of Mirage is not the Septarian of Zero.
No,
We see
Kia.
a shift
We
in the presentation.
we see a shift in that the Septarian of Mirage has sentience, and Kia
Yeah,
has sentience, whereas
yeah,
the Oriole does not.
they can change. They can act contrary. They're not automata, not essentially computers, input, output. Does Aidios have a plan? A grand plan? Is Kia acting within this plan, even by rejecting? Is she acting without it? Is there no plan at all? And that brings in mind the demiurge character of Platonic and Gnostic texts as not someone who's omniscient, omnipotent, you know?
I do think that we've seen enough references, at least talking to church people in Zemuria, that there's this conception of Aidios' grand plan. Um, at the very least, it seems to me that Aidios is basically the Christian God, just mentioned in a different form. Um, but then again, I kind of stopped talking to every NPC, so I have not talked to every single priestess every single time. Maybe there's stuff that I'm missing. Um, well, what do you think? Do you think Aidios has a plan? What's Aidios's plan for you, Kevin?
This podcast, that's the plan.
That's the plan. Um,
I don't know. The way, Aidios will, we've seen that. I don't know, is that this generic expression of religious faith, or is there something more and deeper to it? There's no Satan analog. We don't see this not even in Manichaean, but an adversary, which now that I think about it,
we know that there are demons.
yeah, but not like a grand. There's no Lucifer analog. And I find that really fascinating because the way this series is structured, especially with how the church is very much a mirror to Ouroboros, we don't get this mirror of the metaphysical, religious, or cosmic combat. We get the Septarians. The Septarians seem to be the major antagonists of the arcs so far, of Sky, of Crossbell. I don't really count the third. It's
I wouldn't call them antagonists. They are tools of the antagonists, and they're certainly important.
yeah,
But it's not like the Septarians are acting themselves are acting contrary to our protagonists. I guess maybe Kia
no
technically by disobeying
final.
Lloyd, but that doesn't count.
Yeah, yeah, and these are inchoate, ill-formed thoughts, but the Septarians seem. I mean, obviously, they're. I think we'll learn about five more as the games go on.
Yeah, I think so. But speaking of the church, and knowledge of the church, I want to say something, Kevin, and I've already told you this in private conversations, but I have been not reprimanded per se, but it has been mentioned on Twitter by at least one member of our audience that I have been hinting to you too much that Wazy was a member of the church, that I practically guided you to the correct um, conclusion by pointing out how the fuck could Wazy know about Pleroma grass, and highlighting all of the churchy connections that he can have. And somehow in that episode, you convinced yourself that he was not a member of the church because you didn't want him to be. And so then when you finally found out, the reaction that you gave me was one of shock and awe. And so I would like you to explain what was going through your mind when you found out that Wazi was a member of the gralsritter.
Well, I just thought, I think I built a confined box on what I thought of as the narrative and convinced myself it has to go along this path that not the game that I constructed. One. And two, I think the hints, I don't think they were that obvious that the game threw at us.
I would say this is more like a Joshua thing where if you go back and play it, it's very obvious. Like it's very clear once you realize that Wazi and Reese know each other, that every time they interact, they act like they don't know each other, but they do.
So when you were playing these two games, was it obvious to you
When I first played it, no. This caught me by surprise my first time. The second time playing through it, it's been there from the beginning.
that he was not just the church, but a gralsritter?
I think it becomes pretty clear once he knows Reese. Because it seems very clear that he knows who Reese is, which he would only know if he was a gralsritter.
You'll have to look in trails in a database and then see what's
Like there, you'll
that
notice that
isolate that conversation.
there's a lot of like
Do
ellipses
we
when
want to
Reese is
pause?
saying stuff. No, we don't need a pause. I'm just telling you that there's a lot of
Okay.
ellipses when like it brings attention to the fact that Wazi isn't saying anything when Reese is in the room. And we know in JRPGs when there's ellipses, that means something. If he's not going to say anything, he's just not going to say anything. For the game to like point out and Wazi isn't saying anything, that screams a lot.
Yeah. It recontextualizes him. I did think that. I do think that it deep cover. Reese was the oh, keep the archbishop on the toy in your right hand so they don't see the dagger in the left. They think, oh, I found out the secret agent the church smuggled in, but actually it's been under my nose the entire time.
Right. The only thing that
And,
kind of
and
goes against that is that Reese is not there the whole time that Wazi's there.
you know,
So, Kevin, what did you think about Fragments as a whole? There's a lot of information that got put into this small, like I did this, what, in an hour and a half? Most of it is a visual novel, basically. There's small amounts of gameplay, breaking out of the police station, and then running, because you don't need to do any of the fights on the road out of there. And then more exposition. It's basically a plot dump, but it's also like starting to bring all of the plot strands together. So, what did you think about Fragments?
I'm a bit surprised it's its own separate thing. I think it could have fit in chapter in the finale. Because the finale is super long, and this would not have been all that much more to add to it.
I mean, the finale, from what I remember, took me like 10 to 12 hours. You want to add another hour and a half to it?
But at that level, it's not like it's 10%.
That's a whole letter
So
grade.
there's that. Exactly. I thought it was good. My little petty complaints aside, yeah, it's a lot of world building, maybe too much. But the revelations that we got, especially on Wazy, and what this situation is like in Crossbell, they were so well done. I really don't mind on the whole. Like you can quote break the rules if you know what you're doing when you break them. And this quote broke the rules about telling, not showing, but in such a way it was captivating.
Yeah, I mean, and also I think that telling, like, yes, you tell, you don't show, but I think that that means something different. Like, if there's a character that is supposed to be smart, there's a difference between the character doing smart things and everybody just saying that they're smart. You want to show the character doing smart shit. But when it comes to like lore dumps, I think it's almost impossible to always do a show don't tell. Like at some point, you just have to say, "Here's what's happening." But the hope is that you're already so sucked in that that's just giving you more to chew on rather than boring you.
True, true. That's right.
Well,
It's a
Kevin,
bit of a breather
it
before the
is.
finale, and the finale is a marathon that's also a sprint.
It is. So the plan was that, I'd get to work on the finale, and then we would record episodes. That's still the plan. I will say that there is a possibility, though I haven't heard anything official yet, that I might be moving to Philadelphia in the span of 2 weeks, which it was an unplanned thing. If that happens, it will probably be difficult for me to do what I need to do. But at the same time, I don't know when this interview is supposed to happen or what, or if I'm going to take the job. So a lot of we'll just have to see in terms of future releases. But at the very least, we're getting this episode out on time.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about with the finale, with the gameplay, with the plot. It'll fill multiple episodes. I think maybe even more than two. We have the finale. We have our retrospective of not just Azure, but the Crossbell duology as a whole.
We got to do that. We got to actually read the novels that are in this book because we always skip those, but we like to read them in its own episode. There might be uh a manga or a drama CD to bridge the gap between. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if we have any material like that for this after we beat the game. But then after that, we get to change genres completely. Nayuta is the next game we're playing, not Trails of Cold Steel. And I'm excited for that one because I've never played it. It's still in shrink wrap right now. I've owned it for like 2 years.
Colin, do you remember that clip of Steve Harvey I sent you 1 or 2 weekends ago?
I have to admit, Kevin, I don't always watch your all the memes you send me on Twitter,
What?
especially lately. A lot of them, there's a lot of them, and they're not all that funny.
Well, they were sent to me. I only send you, I only select and forward on the highest quality.
Then maybe you should stop because you must consume a lot of low effort memes if that's the high quality stuff you're sending.
Well, there was one in which Steve Harvey, this was sent to me in the context of a political context, and then the caption of that was a Steve Harvey meme about what wives make their husbands think about doing, and the clip was thought about killing myself. And Colin, when you talked about an audio drama, that's what popped into my head.
You know what I can't wait to make you do? There's a musical for
What?
Trails of Cold Steel 1, and we're watching it, and we are critically analyzing it. And
Let's
Kevin, because
see.
it's a musical, but it's in Japanese, which means that you have to read the subtitles, and that means you have to pay attention the entire time. All right, Kevin, is there anything else that you want to mention before we wrap it up for this week?
No, it, Fragments was great. I thought the finale was great. I thought the final boss, Colin, I have done every gameplay of this pod of the games so far. I have played and persevered as frustrated as I was. I beat it. Colin, when I lost to that unskippable, unbeatable, unblockable thing with the final boss, do you know what I did?
No.
I watched on YouTube and uninstalled Azure. I was so angry.
Wait, you haven't beaten the game?
I watched it on YouTube. I am not going back.
Oh my God, Kevin. I mean, knock down the difficulty. The Azure Arbitrator. I mean, I remember it
I
being
can't.
difficult,
I
but not
can't.
that difficult. You don't have cloud
I
backup
can't. You
saves?
cannot.
It's
No, I
Steam.
mean you cannot change the difficulty once you do the game.
Really?
You have to go in and edit the hex codes.
Well, maybe you should do that.
I will not do that.
Well,
We'll talk more about that when we get to it.
rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, I will beat the game. I won't just watch it on YouTube, even though I could, because I've already beaten it years ago.
Until then, I'm Kevin. That's Colin.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.